Ladies and gentlemen, this is Wanted Dead, a third-person action game set in an alternative retro cyberpunk Hong Kong, where your task as Zombie Unit's Lieutenant Hannah Stone with unleashing brutal gun-fu on ninjas and android ninjas. Starring Fee Marie Zimmerman in her first acting role, Quiet from Metal Gear Solid, Danny Glover? Is that Tom Cruise? Okay. Tom Cruise. And what? No. What the? Wanted Dead sounds amazing, doesn't it? Of course it does, and that's why, when I found out about this game a couple of weeks before it dropped, I was hyped. The devs were saying all the right things. By the people who worked on Ninja Gaiden? Check. Hack and slash, beat 'em up, third person shooting? Check. Low-tech 90s retro cyberpunk aesthetic? Check. An old school, hardcore experience inspired by the PS2, Xbox 360 and Dreamcast-ish era? Check, check, check. If you throw all those ingredients in a pot and get it right, you'll straight up do a ratatouille on me. I swear, I will shed tears of joy as I eat up your game. I'm basically waiting for a modern version of the PS2 cult classic, God Hand, and all the silliness and the infuriating bombastic combat that comes with it. So finally, Wanted Dead is released, and the reviews come in. Obviously they're not looking good, so I decide maybe it's best to save my cash this time round. A few days go by, a week goes by, 2 weeks pass since the release, and I still can't shake the game from my mind. A few clicks later, it's owned and downloaded on my Xbox. And let me tell you friends, I'm glad I caved in. Lieutenant Stone wields a katana and a pistol for melee combat. That's right, the pistol is for melee only. And you don't have to worry because Stone also carries an assault rifle. She can pick up an additional firearm in every level, and they generally make an effective and well-balanced pairing with the assault rifle. Except for the grenade launcher, that weapon should not be used in its current form unless it's story related, or if you enjoy blowing yourself up. You have a limited number of grenades which double up as crowd control tools, and for defense, there's blocking, parrying, a counter attack, and super ability that is useful in both offensive and defensive situations. If you're expecting to stroll into a group of enemies chest out like Batman, darting around, sliding under, jumping over, bish bash bosh, Bob's your uncle, then you're going to have a bad time with Wanted Dead. In Wanted Dead, every encounter is carefully designed to challenge your understanding of the tools at your disposal. If you think you can just shoot your way through the whole game, say goodbye to your ammo. If you want to play exclusively as a sword-slashing neo-samurai, just know that Hannah Stone can't deflect bullets. Instead, Wanted Dead asks you to use your offensive, defensive, ranged and melee weapons in tandem. You have to approach every corridor, every arena and combat scenario cautiously, and always put your survival first. There will be enemies in the distance, behind cover or even above and behind you, who need to be taken down with firearms, whilst the stronger guys will charge you and test your parry timing. If you want to stall a group, you can throw an incendiary grenade to cause a bottleneck so you can duel a ninja one-on-one amongst the flames and bullets whizzing by, or kill his lackeys first by activating the sexy bullet time desperation move, leaving opponents open to an execution. And oh my word, those executions are glorious. They never get old, ever. Abilities are quite basic at first, but it doesn't take long to unlock every ability on a skill tree, especially if you engage with some of the minigames and grab collectibles as you come across them for extra experience points. The unlocks are all useful, ranging from added abilities like running attacks, allowing more situations for finishers, and of course, defensive boosts. Teammates might seem useless at first, but they all have an upgrade each that improves their functionality. They're not the best at killing enemies quickly, and sometimes they'll allow you to get butchered until you advance into the arena far enough to trigger their AI. But as the game goes on, you'll find that they do have their uses. They can take aggro and buy you enough time to run away for a cheeky heal or reload, for example. And when you're finally ready to pick off those last few enemies, you might turn around to see they've already dealt with the threat, making you feel like a proud parent. They play an important part in your survival, and when the team splits up, you definitely feel their absence, especially with Doc, who applies 1 revive per checkpoint when he's around. So if it isn't already obvious, I really enjoy the combat in this game. As mentioned earlier, you can't go into encounters on autopilot. And you know which other games have combat that don't allow you to go on autopilot? Soulsborne games. In fact, there's an element of Sekiro's back and forth rhythmic melee combat in the swordplay, especially noticeable when you're going up against blade wielders and bosses. I shit you not, the second boss reminded me of Rooftop Genichiro from Sekiro. If you've played that game, you know that the fight is a skill check to make sure you understand how the melee combat works. You're supposed to stick close to Genichiro and attack relentlessly, looking out for his attacks to parry. I died 4 times on the second boss of Wanted Dead before applying the Genichiro strategy, and it all clicked from that point. The parry rhythm is slightly different for each enemy, but once you get it down, you'll confidently put your gun aside and square off with a tough enemy when you spot them running over. This is far from how it feels when you first start encountering these guys early in the game because of the fear and death associated with them. Don't get me wrong, these blade duels never get easy, but you do become more experienced and confident in your ability to handle them. I mentioned the pistol as a melee weapon earlier. It works really well together with the katana because it has stunning properties allowing you to stop an enemy in their tracks, so you can close the distance to stab and slash them to death. It even has properties similar to Bloodborne as a tool for dealing with unblockable attacks. Some enemies will telegraph these with a red glint, and if you can catch it in time with the pistol, you gain the advantage for a counter. Pulling this off feels so good, and harder enemies will mix up their parryable attacks with unblockables. Dealing with a risk versus reward assault like this and coming out unscathed feels very exhilarating. Taking the melee combat on its own, Wanted Dead is already a fun experience. The fact that you have to constantly move, switch between close quarters and distance shooting, sliding into cover, crowd controlling with the grenades, flanking, retreating for heals, it all comes together very well. Although it isn't perfect, but I'll cover some of my issues in a later section. Between missions, you can kick back at the station. This is mostly for flavour to immerse you in the world of Wanted Dead. You can run into flashbacks to fill out Lieutenant Stone's past, or wander around talking to and taking abuse from the other officers. No one seems to like the zombie unit. You can access all the minigames in the game room, and there's even a full-on side-scrolling shoot 'em up that feels a lot like R-Type. I particularly liked the crane games. They're quite addictive, but also serve as a good source for some additional skill points. You can also get skill points from picking up collectibles. These are usually short reports on characters or situations that go towards filling out the backstories. Some players might find these sections boring, and if you do, you can move straight on to the checkpoint and start the next mission. I personally enjoyed getting the most I could out of the game, so I was happy to run around and eavesdrop on people and chat to the NPCs. It reminded me of the downtime you would get in Astral Chain on Nintendo Switch, although it's nowhere near as in-depth or as well executed as that. But I think it's great that the station is there anyway, and it goes a long way towards building the world of Wanted Dead. If they get to make a sequel, and I hope they do, 110 should expand on the station parts or even go beyond and let you explore the streets of Hong Kong. There's definitely room for a bleak cyberpunk version of Astral Chain. I'm not sure what came first. Did 110 decide to make an homage to an earlier generation of gaming before putting this together? Or did the art director finally reveal the low quality FMVs, basic textures, and boxy cars after years in development, and then they said, it's an homage to the PS2 era, yay! The graphics are mostly subpar, but it does have some highlights. Lieutenant Stone, who you get to see a lot of, mostly looks good thankfully. The faces of the main characters are also good if you don't compare them to the top tier faces you get in Yakuza. And then it kind of falls off from there with some blurriness on the side characters, although you can still make out who their inspirations were. I'm a fan of the anime cutscenes. I think they look awesome, and I would totally watch a full season of a Wanted Dead anime. They take on a more serious tone than the rest of the game, which is an interesting juxtaposition considering that anime is meant for the kiddies, lol. I was also impressed with the posters and art stuck up around the police station. I fully expected to find one or two posters repeated everywhere, like in too many other games, but they actually took the time to individualize them. Overall, I would say the visuals in this game range wildly from very poor to just above acceptable. It never gets into the range of excellent. A lot has been said about the voice acting in this game, and I don't disagree with the negativity. The voice acting is bad. The only person who pulls out a good performance in this game is Stephanie Joulston, who you might remember from Metal Gear Solid. The rest of the cast, especially the NPCs, sound like they went into a recording booth with no direction or context and fired off a bunch of lines.
Synths, you know, they don't look that different from a human, do they?
There are so many moments where lines are delivered with the wrong intonation and the sentiment behind whatever's going on falls flat. We all know that the delivery is just as important as what's being said. On top of that, there are only a handful of actors playing the majority of NPCs. So sometimes you can get one person playing a full room of people, like Eddie Murphy without the talent. But you know what? All of that I can live with. I'm not too bothered by the level of acting because I find it quite endearing in a game like this, and I especially like the sound of Fee Zimmerman's voice because it sounds unique in this form of media. But what does bother me is the poor sound engineering. Lines are sometimes piled on top of each other, they can be poorly timed, or the volume of sound effects and voices are just completely wrong. Characters can sound like they're far away, and explosions right in front of your face. The music didn't really leave an impression on me, even though the opportunity was there. It's the perfect setting to make a banger of a soundtrack, with so many other forms of media having already provided examples that can be followed or copied. Again, just like the vocal work, it's unfortunately poorly handled. Music can stop abruptly when moving from room to room with no crossfading. Sometimes different tracks will play on top of each other, and in the final level, they didn't bother to loop the music, so it just stops suddenly and plays again after a couple of seconds.
I can't believe they attacked. I heard you missed. What are you doing?
A note to collectors out there, when the price goes down on the physical release, it might be a good idea to pick this up because of the licensed songs used in parts of the game. Music licensing is notoriously shaky when it comes to games, so I can imagine 10 years from now, maybe some of the soundtrack will be replaced or patched. The sound engineering isn't the only thing that doesn't work very well in Wanted Dead. There are a few things that really shouldn't be issues now after the advancements in gaming that we've enjoyed in recent years, but they serve as a reminder that making games is hard, and not every studio has the time and money to get it out the door on release day polished and intact. First of all, the cover system. It's not very obvious where you can and can't use cover, and when you are in cover, it doesn't have that robust stickiness that is in Gears of War. There were times when I just wanted to lean out from cover to take a look at the situation before committing any ammo, but I'd end up sliding right out like a sitting duck. It could be argued that this is in line with the manual feel of the game and it makes the transition to melee combat immediate. I would accept that argument if it was made, but it doesn't change the fact that choosing a spot for cover feels like a gamble at times. In a game where health is in short supply, there shouldn't be any place for ambiguity. Another big issue with Wanted Dead is the lack of optimization. In general, the game is poorly optimized on a Series X. The frame rate can tank in spots and can even get janky when there's not much going on. I don't think there's an excuse for this given that the graphics aren't that detailed or complex looking to begin with, and the premise of the game is quite basic. There are games out there like Astral Chain and Yakuza that are somewhat similar with loads of things going on with a bunch of flashy, high quality graphics and animations, and they run perfectly well in comparison. The karaoke and ramen eating games are essentially rhythm sections, where you wait for the notes to slide along and time your button presses to the music. I've always loved music rhythm games ever since the Beatmania and Guitar Man days. Throughout the years, I've played many of them, and never have I encountered one where the notes would stutter down a timeline the way it does in this game. You can get by if you pay attention to the music instead of relying on visual timing. But come on, how is it possible to get that so wrong? It all leads me to believe that the developers simply ran out of time. And I know every game has its struggles to reach the finishing line, but this was not a struggle that 110 Industries came out of cleanly. But there is some good news. As of late February 2023, 110 has announced that they've heard their fans, and there will be patches coming soon to iron out the bugs. They even state that we can look forward to reworks/additions to the base game. So after finishing the crashes and sound issues, it seems like maybe they could work at improving the frame rate and give us some additional content. I don't know, but I'd be very impressed and very happy if they simply jazz up and improve upon everything that's already there. As it is now, it's like they had the framework of a game all set, like a first draft or working alpha, but they didn't have the time to connect the dots properly, or even complete a third act, which this game seemed to be working towards, but again, didn't have the time to realise it. I've mentioned a bit of FromSoft in this review, and that's not only because of some of the combat elements. One of the things I love about FromSoft games is that you have to actively play them. When 110 Industries talks about this game as a throwback to older generations of gaming, I don't believe they're just referring to the cheesy dialogue, wacky characters, old school difficulty and the jankiness. For me, it's also that feeling of being engrossed in your game deeply, being present and at the edge of your seat during every combat encounter, because a slip of focus means death. I love this about Wanted Dead, and the enjoyment I get out of the old school combat holds it all up for me. You're given a set of tools, and it's up to you to find success within the sandpit. By comparison, most modern games are designed for you to succeed, as long as you keep pushing up on the control stick and respond to the button prompts. Is Wanted Dead a well-made game? No. But is it a good game? Is it fun to play and has its own character and charm? Did I enjoy the experience as a whole? Yes, 100% yes. Wanted Dead has the heart and soul of a good game, possibly a great game. Hopefully, when it hits a safe price for you to check out, all the bugs will be fixed and maybe other areas of the game will be polished up. I do think it's perfectly enjoyable right now if you temper your expectations, especially if you're a fan of quirky games like God Hand and Yakuza. I had so much fun with Wanted Dead, and I can't wait to play it some more on Japanese hard mode. I give Wanted Dead a 7, with a bump up to 8 if they can sort out the technical issues. Thanks for watching everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up because it really does help, and subscribe if you want to see more gaming and tech videos.